Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the crooked little cottage of a witch. The kind you'd expect to find deep in a fairy tale forest, where the roof leans like it's half asleep, and the smoke from the chimney curls in lazy question marks against the dawn sky. Inside, you wake in a bed that feels like it was stuffed with moss, feathers, and maybe one or two old secrets. A thin stream of sunlight pushes through the shutters, lighting up the shelves stacked with jars of things you'd rather not identify before coffee. Dried beetles, crumbled leaves, and something that could be pickled eyeballs or just very confused grapes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now, because nothing's funnier than realizing someone out there is listening to witches boil potions at 3 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first sound you notice isn't birdsong, but bubbling. Your cauldron has been awake long before you. Typical. It's already gurgling like a stomach after too many tacos, sending out a sweet sour smell of lavender and... was that burnt shoelace? Your mornings are never ordinary. The cottage itself seems to stretch and yawn with you, the beams creaking like old bones settling back into place. As you swing your legs out of bed, the wooden floor feels cool, scattered with sprigs of herbs you must have dropped last night. You shuffle past a crooked mirror that insists on showing you yesterday's hair no matter how much you comb it. There's no need for toothpaste when you swish with mint leaves from the windowsill planter, though the taste suggests this plant had ambitions to be basil instead. Folklorists often argue about witches' cottages. Were they symbols of independence or cautionary tales about women who lived alone? Historians can't even agree if medieval villagers truly feared witches' homes, or if most just wanted the free remedies. A quirky fact? In parts of Eastern Europe, some believed witches' cottages stood on chicken legs. Literally. Baba Yaga's legendary house wasn't just quirky architecture, it danced like a cranky ostrich when you got too close. Your own cottage isn't that dramatic, but the way the beams sway, you wouldn't bet against it picking up a leg or two if annoyed. You stretch, muttering a half-awake spell to the cauldron, more of a shh, 5 more minutes than actual sorcery, and shuffle toward the shelf for your first cup of potion tea. It's not coffee, but it's close. Dark, earthy, with the faint aftertaste of walnuts and regret. And of course, there's always the little joke the forest likes to play on you. The window flings itself open, a breeze barges in, and suddenly half your dried nettles are airborne, tickling your nose. You sneeze once, loud enough to rattle in the jars, and the cauldron belches in sympathy. Who needs roommates when your entire kitchen reacts to your allergies? You sip slowly, feeling the warmth settle into your chest. Outside, the day yawns open. Mist lingers between the trees, shadows lean across the mossy path, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows like he's filing a noise complaint. You smile because, in this life, even mornings start like stories, half ordinary, half enchanted, with just enough chaos to remind you that being a fairy tale witch means never, ever having a boring sunrise. The second sip of your morning brew hits differently. The bitterness lingers, and you're not sure if the earthy aftertaste is from roasted roots or from last night's ladle accidentally falling in. Either way, breakfast doesn't really start until you add the potion. Yes, the potion, not the eggs and toast. You ladle a ladleful from the cauldron into a chipped clay mug. It's glowing faintly, which is not comforting, but you tell yourself glow just means fresh. You raise the mug to your lips and pause. The steam curls upward in shapes that look suspiciously like dancing skeletons. That's usually a good sign. Usually. You take a gulp. Instantly, your tongue feels like it's wrapped in wool socks that were left in a damp cave. Delicious? No. Effective? Absolutely. The warmth spreads through your veins until your fingers tingle. Now you can face the day, or at least the next 20 minutes, without biting someone's head off. The thing about potions is they're both food and philosophy. Every witch has her signature morning mix. Some lean toward herbal blends. Think sleepy chamomile or cheerful lemon balm. Others, they toss in things like powdered dragon scales or crushed beetle wings. Folklore scholars debate endlessly whether medieval witches actually drank such concoctions or whether the flying ointments mentioned in trials were just coded references to, well, hallucinogenic herbs. Fun tidbit, some recipes really did involve nightshade, henbane, and mandrake, plants powerful enough to knock you flat or make you believe your broomstick just earned frequent flyer miles. But back to your breakfast. You chew on a crust of bread baked 2 days ago, tough enough to double as a weapon. You dunk it in the potion, pretending it's a biscotti. It still tastes like an old boot, but now it's a soggy old boot, which is somehow an improvement. Across the room, the cauldron burbles smugly as if to say, "Told you so." It always has that tone. You're never sure if the cauldron is alive or if your brain just insists on giving it personality because loneliness in a crooked cottage hits hard. Either way, it judges your breakfast choices daily. You consider sticking out your tongue, but then remember the last time you mocked it, your porridge turned into slugs. As the potion settles, you glance out the window at the forest waking up. Mist hugs the ground and dewdrops cling to the spiderwebs like sequins on a thrifted gown. Somewhere, a woodpecker drills with all the enthusiasm of a neighbor who insists on vacuuming at dawn. You can't help but chuckle, thinking how every fairy tale morning looks beautiful, unless you're the one cleaning cobwebs off your herbs. Your mind drifts to debates you've overheard in hushed witch circles. Some say the morning potion is a tradition handed down from the crone goddesses, Hecate, Baba Yaga, the Morrigan. Others argue it's just survival, a hot drink to push away damp forest chill. No one agrees, of course, but that's the witch way. Disagreement is half the fun. Another joke slips into your head. People in villages have their oat lattes with soy milk. You've got your bubbling greenish-gray potion with the faint aroma of swamp. Who's the real hipster now? The cup finally empties, leaving behind only a thin ring of sludge at the bottom, which you're 90% sure is edible. You set it aside and sigh with a mix of contentment and dread. Breakfast is done, which means the real day begins. From the corner, your broom rattles against the wall like an impatient dog wanting a walk. "Not yet," you mutter. First things first, potion before breakfast. Second things, argue with your crow. You don't even make it 3 steps before the crow begins. He's perched on the rafters, looking smug, which is his permanent expression. About time he woke up, he croaks, feathers ruffling as if he's been rehearsing insults all morning. "Good morning to you too," you mutter, rubbing your eyes. You've just survived a potion that tasted like swamp socks, and here comes your feathery roommate, ready for a debate club at sunrise. The crow hops closer, landing on the table with a thud. His claws scrape the wood. You know, if you actually boiled that potion for 47 minutes instead of 45, it wouldn't taste like swamp socks. You stare at him. "Didn't realize I asked for a TED Talk on potion brewing." He tilts his head. "Didn't realize you wanted indigestion?" This is the rhythm of your mornings. Potion first, then verbal sparring with your crow. Folklorists say witches' animal companions, familiars, were supposed to be servants, spies, or even demons in disguise. But no one tells you the truth. Most of them are backseat drivers with wings. A quirky historical tidbit: some 16th century witch trial records actually list cats and toads with names like Vinegar Tom or Grimalkin, as if the witches ran a medieval pet daycare. Scholars still argue if these familiars were real animals or simply symbolic, metaphors for independence, rebellion, or maybe just someone to blame when your bread burned. You break off a bit of bread and toss it toward him. He catches it midair like an Olympic athlete. "Needs more salt," he says, through a beakful of crumbs. "Needs less attitude," you shoot back. He chuckles, a low, gravelly sound that somehow manages to sound superior. The two of you could argue forever about anything: potion brewing, weather predictions, whether or not owls are overrated. Spoiler, he thinks they are. Deeply overrated. Too many feathers, not enough brains, he always says. As you move about the cottage, gathering baskets for herb picking later, the crow offers a steady stream of advice you didn't ask for. Take the wicker one, the handle's sturdier. And don't forget the iron scissors. Remember the nettles bit you last week? He says it all with that smug satisfaction of someone who thinks they're always right, which annoyingly he often is. You can't help but laugh. Here you are, a witch of mystery and power, rumored by villagers to summon storms and curse crops, yet you're also a roommate to a sarcastic bird who critiques your choice of baskets. "This is my life," you mutter under your breath. The crow looks at you with one beady eye. Could be worse. You could live with a goose. And honestly, he's got a point. You tie a scarf around your head, preparing for the day ahead, and the crow hops onto your shoulder like an old prickly friend. His claws pinch, but it feels right. Companionship in a crooked cottage doesn't come easy. Sometimes it's not about finding someone who agrees with you, it's about finding someone who argues well. Outside the forest waits, mist curling at the edges like a secret, still deciding if it should be shared. But before you step out, you give the crow one last glance. "You're not smarter than me," you insist. He smirks, or at least his feathers shift like a shrug. "Keep telling yourself that." The door groans as you push it open, and the forest greets you like an old friend who smells faintly of moss and damp wood smoke. Morning mist still clings low to the ground, curling between the roots of ancient oaks. You step barefoot onto the earth, because boots, frankly, are overrated, and the cool dew soaks into your toes. It's not unpleasant. It's grounding, like nature's version of morning coffee. Your basket swings from one hand, scissors clinking softly inside. On your shoulder, the crow adjusts his grip. "Careful," he mutters. "You always trip on that first root." You scowl. "Not today." Immediately, you catch your toe on a knobby root. The crow cackles so hard he nearly falls off. You mutter something unprintable and keep walking. The forest is alive with sounds: the creak of branches, the occasional squirrel skittering overhead, the faint rustle of something larger that you really hope isn't in the mood for breakfast. The air tastes green, full of sap and wet leaves. You breathe it in like you're sipping soup straight from the bowl. Folklorists say witches and forests have always been inseparable, like peanut butter and jelly, or socks and laundry that mysteriously disappear. The woods were both pantry and temple, a place of ingredients and secrets. Historians still debate whether witches really knew more about herbs than the average villager, or if people simply assumed they did because anyone carrying bundles of weeds looked suspicious. A quirky little tidbit: in some old herbals, parsley wasn't just for cooking. It was linked with summoning spirits. Imagine calling ghosts into your kitchen just by garnishing a stew. You crouch near a patch of nettles, scissors ready. The crow eyes you. Remember, they bite. They don't bite. You snip carefully, ignoring the sting that immediately zaps your fingers. Okay, fine, they nibble. Further along, you find wild thyme blooming shyly near the roots of a pine. The scent is strong, lemony, sharp. It clears your head better than the swamp potion ever could. You tuck sprigs into your basket, already imagining how they'll season tonight's stew, or maybe charm a villager into believing their cough is gone. Then there's the foxglove. Tall stalks of purple bells lean over the path, nodding as if they know you by name. Beautiful, deadly, and annoyingly dramatic. You clip just a few blossoms, careful not to touch the milky sap. Foxglove can heal hearts or stop them. It's like the bad boy of the herb world. Scholars argue endlessly whether witches used plants like these for medicine or for darker purposes. The truth? Probably both. Depends on the day. The crow hops down from your shoulder to snatch up a beetle. Don't forget the mushrooms, he says through a mouthful. Right, mushrooms. You spot a cluster of tiny white caps growing in a circle, a perfect little fairy ring. You hesitate. Everyone knows the rules. Fairy rings are invitations or traps. Step wrong and you might spend 100 years dancing with sprites who have no concept of personal space. You kneel at the edge, cutting only what grows outside the ring. The air here hums faintly, like the echo of distant bells. You pocket the mushrooms, whispering a quiet thanks, just in case anyone's listening. Your basket grows heavy with green, purple, and earthy brown. It's a rainbow of usefulness, if rainbows were made of plants that itch, sting, or occasionally bite back. You straighten, stretching your back, and glance at the sky. The mist is thinning, the forest brightening, the day pressing forward, whether you're ready or not. The crow flaps back onto your shoulder, smug as ever. Not bad, he says. You grin. Not bad at all. By the time you make it back to the cottage, the basket is brimming with herbs and mushrooms, and your hair smells faintly of pine needles and foxglove. You barely set the basket on the cricket table before you hear it. 3 soft knocks on the door. The kind of hesitant knocks that sound like someone debating whether they should run away mid-tap. The crow mutters from his perch. Villagers, nervous ones. Bet you 5 beetles they want charms. You roll your eyes and open the door. Sure enough, 2 villagers stand there, hats clutched in their hands like guilty secrets. They look at you the way people look at thunderstorms. Useful for watering crops, terrifying if you're caught outside without shelter. Good morning, Mistress Witch, one of them stammers. Lovely herb weather for gathering, isn't it? You glance at the sky, where ominous clouds are already plotting mischief. Sure, let's call it lovely. They shuffle awkwardly, exchanging glances. Finally, the braver one clears his throat. We were hoping you might have something. For luck, you see. Our cow's gone dry, and my wife swears the neighbor cursed her. The crow caws loudly, sounding suspiciously like laughter. Always the cows, he mutters. You ignore him and beckon the villagers inside. They tiptoe over the threshold like your cottage might bite, eyes darting to the shelves lined with jars. Their gazes linger on a particularly suspicious bottle labeled, "Do not drink unless you want to glow." It's mostly pickle brine. Mostly. Folklore fact. Villagers in old tales often feared witches, but they visited them anyway, because who else could cure a fever, charm away bad luck, or make sure a butter churn didn't explode? A quirky tidbit, in 17th century Scotland, some witches were accused of bewitching ale, which honestly just sounds like someone's way of blaming a hangover on magic. Scholars still debate whether these interactions were built on genuine fear or whether witches were simply the local pharmacists with terrible PR. You rummage through your herbs, pulling out sprigs of thyme, nettle, and a few secret leaves you never name aloud.
You tie them together with a red thread and hand the bundle to the villagers. Hang this above your doorway. It won't make your cow friendlier, but it'll keep her milk flowing. They beam, relief flooding their faces. One tries to press coins into your hand, but you shake your head. Bring me honey next time. You pause. Good honey, not that watery stuff. The crow leans in and whispers, and maybe pie. You swat at him, but the villagers laugh nervously, unsure if it's safe to find you funny. They thank you a dozen times before scurrying off, clutching the charm like it's solid gold. When the door closes, the cottage exhales with you. You stand in the silence for a moment, herbs still clutched in your hand, then glance at the crow. You were right, you admit. Of course I was. I'm always right, and you still owe me 5 beetles. You sigh, shaking your head. A day in a witch's life is never quiet, not even 5 minutes after breakfast.
The forest has barely settled after the villagers' nervous retreat when a new presence arrives, sly, slinking, with eyes too bright for daylight. At first, you hear only the crunch of leaves outside your cottage, soft and deliberate. The crow stiffens, feathers ruffling. "Fox," he whispers, his tone carrying both annoyance and admiration. You step to the doorway, and there he is, a fox spirit, coat like liquid copper, tail swishing as if it's sweeping secrets off the ground. He doesn't walk so much as glide, every step deliberate. His grin stretches wide, showing teeth far too sharp for small talk. "Good morning, witch," the fox purrs. His voice is like velvet draped over a dagger. "Lovely day for bargains, don't you think?" You cross your arms. "That depends. Bargains with you usually end with me regretting something." The fox chuckles, bowing theatrically. "Not regretting, learning. There's a difference." Folklorists adore fox spirits. They're tricksters across cultures, from Japan's kitsune to Europe's Reynard the Fox. Some tales paint them as helpful, others as downright disastrous. Scholars debate whether these beings were ever meant to be taken literally, or if they were metaphors for the unpredictability of fate. A quirky tidbit? In some Scandinavian folk tales, foxes were said to steal fire from the sky, their tails catching sparks that became the northern lights, which makes you wonder if your guest has a bit of aurora still smoldering in his fur. The crow mutters, "Don't trust him. Last time he showed up, you lost 3 eggs and half your dignity." The fox flicks an ear. "Correction. She traded those eggs for wisdom." "Wisdom that involved falling in a pond," the crow snaps. I sigh. "All right, fox. What do you want?" The fox tilts his head, eyes glimmering with too many secrets. Shiny trinkets, a silver spoon, perhaps, or that little mirror on your shelf, the one that refuses to reflect Wednesdays. You arch your brow. "And in return?" "In return," he says smoothly, "I'll tell you where the wild honey hides, sweet, golden, dripping from combs that hum with sunlight." The crow scoffs. "Or he'll send you into a wasp nest the size of your cottage." The fox ignores him, leaning closer. "Come now, witch. Don't you crave sweetness?" Your stomach grumbles, traitor. Honey in your tea sounds dangerously good. You weigh the choice. Silver spoon for honey, or no honey and 1 smug crow. The old spoon, tarnished, rarely used. Finally, you grab it from the shelf and toss it to the fox. He catches it neatly in his teeth, purring with satisfaction. "A pleasure, as always." With a flick of his tail, he adds, "Follow the brook north until you find the oak split by lightning.
There, beneath its roots, the bees keep their treasure. And just like that, he's gone, slipped between shadows, leaving only the faintest smell of wild musk. The crow huffs. You know he's tricking you. Of course, you say, tying up your herb bundle. But the question is, how badly? The crow groans. You're hopeless. You smile, because honestly, half the fun of being a fairy tale witch is seeing just how far the tricksters will go.
The cottage smells of fresh thyme and foxglove, but there's one place that always smells stranger. You unlatch a small iron-bound door at the back of the cottage, and the hinges shriek like they're auditioning for a horror film. Beyond lies the garden you never mentioned to the villagers, the secret patch where only the boldest plants dare to grow. The air changes the moment you step inside. It hums, low and steady, like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. Leaves rustle without wind. Flowers glow faintly in colors no painter could mix. This is not a normal garden. It's where the forbidden herbs thrive, tended by your careful hand and maybe by whispers of things older than you. The crow stays at the threshold, talons gripping the doorframe. I'll wait here, he says, trying to sound casual but clearly nervous. Last time, one of those vines tried to braid my tail. You smirk. They liked you. They attacked me. You step deeper. A vine creeps along the soil, curling lazily until it senses your footsteps. You tap it with your boot, and it retreats, sulking. The blossoms here are extraordinary. Nightshade with petals so dark they look like velvet torn from the sky. Moonflowers that open only when shadows grow long, and your favorite, the dream bloom, a pale blue star-shaped flower that hums so softly you almost forget you're awake. Historians argue endlessly about forbidden plants. Were they truly magical or just the ones villagers didn't understand? Folklorists note how many fairy tales treat plants as characters. Apples that poison, beans that grow skyward, roses that curse or bless. A quirky tidbit? In some medieval herbals, mandrakes were said to scream when pulled from the earth, loud enough to kill a person. Scholars still can't agree if people actually believed this or if it was just a botanical scare tactic. You kneel to water the dream blooms. As droplets fall, the blossoms tremble, releasing a faint shimmer into the air. You inhale, and suddenly you remember fragments of someone else's dream. Walking through a palace of mirrors, hearing laughter that sounded like rain. The memory vanishes before you can hold it, leaving you both enchanted and unsettled. See? Creepy, the crow mutters from afar. You laugh softly. Creepy is in the job description. At the far corner, a row of black thistles sways, though there's no breeze. You pluck one carefully, its thorns sharp enough to draw a bead of blood. You smear it into the soil as an offering. The plant stills, satisfied. This garden is your secret, your sanctuary, and your reminder that not all beauty is safe. Some blossoms sing, some whisper, and some would happily strangle you if you forgot to greet them properly. But in their danger, there's power. You fill a smaller basket with blossoms that glow, hum, or pout when plucked, then step back toward the cottage door. The crow sighs of relief as you reappear. Happy now? You ask. Happy you survived. Then, after a pause, but if one of those jars in your kitchen starts humming tonight, I'm moving into the rafters permanently. You grin. The secret garden always leaves you tingling, like you've brushed against a dream you shouldn't have touched, but couldn't resist. Back inside, the cottage feels warmer, cozier, almost smug, as if it knows you made it back from the forbidden garden in one piece. Your stomach rumbles, reminding you that while herbs, nettles, and foxglove might be fascinating, they do not qualify as lunch. You set down your harvest, untie your scarf, and rummage through the pantry. The shelves groan under jars labeled with wildly unhelpful names like essence of who knows what and probably pickles. You finally find a loaf of bread that looks like it's seen better centuries, and a wedge of cheese just this side of suspicious. The crow hops onto the table, eyeing your finds. Cheese again? You'll turn into a wheel if you're not careful. Better a wheel than a feather duster, you reply. You slice the bread. Before you can reach for the butter, something remarkable happens. The bread slices scoot together, stack themselves neatly, and fold around the cheese. Voila! An enchanted sandwich. It even winks at you. Show off, you mutter. Taking a bite, the crust is still tough enough to qualify as medieval armor, but at least the filling tastes halfway edible. Historians sometimes wonder if witches really believed their food could come alive, or if enchanted feasts were metaphors, symbolic warnings about temptation and abundance. Folklorists point out that enchanted food appears everywhere in tales, from Persephone's fateful pomegranate seeds to fairy banquets where one bite binds you for eternity. A quirky tidbit? In some Irish stories, butter made by witches was said to never melt, even in fire, a suspiciously useful trick during hot summers. Scholars still argue if this was superstition or envy from neighbors with runny butter. You wash down the sandwich with a sip of nettle tea, slightly bitter, slightly grassy, like drinking a meadow. The cup grumbles faintly, unhappy about being hot. You blow on it anyway, because even enchanted crockery needs cooling off. The crow crunches on a beetle, smirking. That sandwich looked better than it tasted. You roll your eyes. Do you want a bite? No, thanks. I prefer my food not to wink at me. A sudden clatter interrupts the banter. From the corner, the cauldron burps and spills over, releasing a puff of steam that smells suspiciously like cinnamon rolls. You tilt your head. Did we make dessert? The crow peers into the steam. Either dessert or the cauldron's developing a sweet tooth. You can't help laughing. Lunch in a witch's cottage is never just bread and cheese. It's a negotiation with half-sentient cookware and overly dramatic sandwiches. It's chaos served on chipped plates, garnished with sarcasm. When the last crumbs vanish, you lean back in your chair, full in the way only enchanted leftovers can fill you, satisfied, amused, and slightly suspicious that the sandwich is still blinking in your stomach. Ready for the next disaster? The crow asks. You smile faintly. Always. Afternoons in a fairy tale cottage never stay quiet for long. The fire sighs in the hearth, the tea cools in its cup, and for a rare moment you imagine you might drift into a nap. But then, thump, thump, thump. Someone is knocking at your door. The crow groans. If it's another lost night, I'm not doing introductions. Last one nearly polished his armor with your floor rug. You rise, smoothing your skirts, and unlatch the door. Outside stands a villager, cheeks flushed with urgency, clutching a basket of apples as if it were a life raft. "Witch," she blurts. No manners, but at least she's direct. "My baby won't sleep. He cries all night, no matter what I do. Please, can you help?" You gesture her inside. The crow mutters something about part-time nanny service, but stays put. On your work table, you set out 3 herbs from your morning harvest: chamomile for calm, lavender for rest, and dream bloom, the dangerous one. The villager gasps. Isn't that forbidden? Only if misused, you say gently. A petal in warm milk brings sleep. A handful in wine brings, well, permanent sleep. You leave that part hanging. Folklorists often note how witches in stories blur the line between healer and threat. In medieval villages, the local witch was usually the only person who understood herbs well enough to treat fevers, aches, or restless babies. Historians still debate whether these women were truly feared or quietly respected, but branded dangerous when politics turned sour. A quirky tidbit: in 17th century Scotland, some women were accused of witchcraft specifically for brewing too effective sleep potions, which sounds less like sorcery and more like exhausted neighbors jealous of uninterrupted rest. You measure out a single shimmering petal and drop it into the villager's basket. The apples shiver at its touch, as if agreeing to carry the blessing. Steep this in milk, you instruct. One sip will ease him into slumber. The villager's eyes widen with relief. Thank you. What do I owe you? You wave her off. Bring me back the empty basket, and maybe a story. She stammers thanks and hurries out, clutching her cure like treasure. When the door closes, the crow tilts his head. You gave away a dream bloom. Weren't you saving those for the next full moon ritual? You shrug. A baby's sleep is worth more than my rituals. The crow flaps onto the windowsill, feathers ruffling in the sunlight. You're too soft for a witch. Or maybe, you reply, smiling faintly, that's exactly what makes me one. The room hums quietly with leftover magic. Somewhere in the distance, a baby's cries will soon fade into steady breaths, and in your cottage you feel the peculiar satisfaction that comes from being both feared and needed, an eternal paradox in the life of a fairy tale witch.
The sun sinks low, bleeding streaks of gold and violet across the tree line. Shadows stretch like yawns across the cottage floor, and your crow companion rustles his feathers with the self-importance of someone who's been waiting all day for this moment. "Circle time," he croaks. "Don't forget the chalk, or last time's embarrassment." You roll your eyes because, yes, you did forget chalk once. Drawing ritual sigils with a stick in the dirt looked less like mystical geometry and more like a toddler's first attempt at hopscotch. The spirits were polite about it, but you could tell they were holding back laughter. This time, you're ready. You step outside with a piece of chalk, a pouch of salt, and the last curl of incense smoke trailing from your fingers. The forest edge is quiet, as if holding its breath. You kneel and begin tracing spirals on the earth, steady strokes forming loops and intersecting lines, until a shimmering circle gleams faintly in the twilight. When people think of witches, they imagine midnight ceremonies, eerie chants, bonfires, and perhaps a goat who looks suspiciously like your grumpy neighbor. In truth, ritual circles were once part of everyday folk practice, spaces marked for safety, divination, or seasonal celebrations. Historians note that some were elaborate works of geometry, while others were just hasty loops to keep mischievous fairies from stealing livestock. And here's the ongoing debate. Scholars still argue whether those circles were believed to trap spirits inside, or simply to keep you safe while speaking with them. You're not sure either, but tonight it feels like a little of both. The crow hops around the outer rim, checking your lines like a building inspector. One wobble there. If a demon shows up wearing mismatched socks, I'm blaming you. You light the incense and set it in the circle's center.
The smoke curls upward, forming shapes that almost resemble faces before drifting away. You whisper a name you half remember from your grandmother's stories, and the air shifts, lighter, cooler, as though an unseen guest has joined you. The forest stirs. The leaves shiver, though no wind moves them. You sense eyes watching, patient and curious. Old winds, carry kindness this night. Lend your strength to those who ask. The crow coughs pointedly, and maybe throw in a discount voucher for broom repair. A ripple of unseen laughter tickles your ears, as if the spirits themselves enjoy his sarcasm. For a heartbeat, the world feels porous, your circle the thin veil between what is and what might be. When the smoke fades, you close the circle with a line of salt, sweeping your hand gently across the chalk until it dissolves into nothing. The forest exhales, the pressure lifts, and night fully arrives. You rise slowly, brushing dirt from your knees. Another ritual complete, another balance kept. The crow flutters onto your shoulder. "Not bad," he admits. "Though next time, try not to draw a shape that looks like a lopsided pancake." You smile, weary but content. For all the mystery, for all the whispered stories, the truth is this: the life of a witch is stitched together from tiny acts of connection, between herb and hand, villager and spell, spirit and silence. And as the dusk deepens, you know the night is just beginning.
The moon finally heaves itself over the tree line, plump and glowing like a lantern that forgot to dim. Your crow stretches his wings and mutters something about prime gossip hour. He's right. Tonight is for gathering, not just herbs and potions, but stories. You follow a narrow path through the forest, lantern swinging lazily in your hand. The ground is soft with moss, and the air smells faintly of wood smoke. Soon you reach a clearing where 3 other witches already lounging around a cauldron that doubles as a communal soup pot. One raises a hand in greeting. The other 2 are already deep in some ridiculous argument about whether bats or owls make better familiars. "Ah, finally," one of them calls. "We thought you got eaten by your own cauldron." You plop down on a log, the crow perching proudly above you. "He tried," you say with a straight face, "but he choked on the seasoning." Laughter ripples through the clearing. Witches, contrary to popular reputation, gossip like old neighbors leaning over a picket fence. They swap potion recipes with the same fervor others swap cookie recipes. Someone pulls out a vial of luminous blue liquid. "Best thing for wrinkles," she brags. Another rolls her eyes. "I tried that once, ended up glowing like a lantern bug for a week." You sip the communal soup, which tastes suspiciously like pumpkin and secrets, and let yourself enjoy the chatter. Historically speaking, witches in folklore were rarely solitary hermits. Many old trial records in Europe mention covens, though historians still argue whether these were real social gatherings or just paranoid fantasies cooked up by fearful authorities. Some say groups of women met under the moon to share healing practices and stories. Others insist covens were invented as an excuse to prosecute multiple women at once. The quirky tidbit? In 1662, a Scottish trial transcript records a group of accused witches who confessed, not to dark pacts, but to meeting weekly to bake bread together. Truly, nothing more suspicious than carbohydrates. Back in the clearing, the conversation drifts into embarrassing tales. One witch admitted she once turned a suitor into a goat for bragging too much, only to find he was a better conversationalist that way. Another confessed she once mispronounced a charm and accidentally enchanted her laundry to fold itself and critique her fashion sense. You share your own story. The time you mixed up dream bloom petals with onion skins and gave an entire wedding party prophetic nightmares about turnips. The cauldron of soup nearly tips from the laughter. The moon climbs higher. The air grows colder. Yet the warmth of shared stories, the crackle of fire, and the gentle bickering keep you anchored in this peculiar sisterhood. When the crow interrupts with a loud, "Boring! Tell them about the time you nearly kissed a frog prince," you hush him, cheeks warm, and everyone cackles. Some nights are for rituals, others for solitude. But nights like this remind you why the stories of witches endure. Not as solitary figures hunched in shadows, but as women who gather, laugh, and pass down fragments of magic stitched together with humor.
When you finally return to your crooked little cottage, the night is deep, and the moon has traded its bright silver for a softer, sleepier glow. The crow flops onto the windowsill, muttering something about gossip-induced exhaustion, while you light a single candle. Its flame trembles, casting tall shadows that sway across the shelves lined with jars, bones, and things you probably shouldn't sniff too closely. Tonight feels right for a history lesson, the kind whispered not by teachers, but by your spellbook itself. You draw it down from the highest shelf with both hands. The leather cover groans like old floorboards, and when you flip it open, the pages flutter, as if impatient to get to the good parts. "Don't peck the boring chapter," the crow says, yawning. "Last time you nearly put me to sleep, and I'm immune to monotony." You ignore him and lay the book flat. The ink on its pages writhes and rearranges, forming scenes that flicker like tiny shadow plays. You lean close, candlelight warming your face. The book whispers of myths, half true, half rumor, entirely opinionated. It begins with a story of Hecate, the ancient goddess of crossroads, torches in hand, dogs howling at her feet. Some cultures revered her as protector of the household. Others feared her as queen of witches. Historians can't seem to agree. Was she a benevolent guide to lost souls, or the shadowy figure who led spirits into mischief? The debate still rattles on in dusty academic halls, as if anyone could pin down a goddess with footnotes. Then the book shifts to something stranger. It murmurs about Babylonian tablets describing women who could summon the dead through incantations carved into clay. Were these women healers, necromancers, or just skilled storytellers with a flair for drama? Scholars argue endlessly, but the book has its own opinion. They were simply bored. A quirky tidbit unfolds next. In medieval England, one pamphlet claimed witches gained power by talking to cats at midnight. Nothing scandalous about that, except the pamphlet warned that cats were secretly government spies. You laugh out loud, imagining your sleepy cottage cat working a double shift as a medieval informant. The crow looks insulted. "Government spies? Cats would never work that hard." The pages continue to unfurl, tales of Slavic witches who traveled in flying mortars instead of brooms, of Norse vulvas who spun prophecy with staves and riddles, of cunning folk in rural villages who handed out love charms in exchange for bread. The book itself grows snarky, slipping in sarcastic commentary between lines. "This scholar," it scribbles with disdain, "thinks witches never gathered in groups. He has clearly never tried gossiping alone." You smirk. It seems your spellbook has inherited some of your personality. Hours slip by like silk, and your candle burns low. You close the book gently, its voice fading into a sigh. The room feels fuller, as though the past itself has curled up by the fire to sleep. "History," you murmur, stroking the cover,
is just another kind of spell. Half truth, half memory, half nonsense. That's 3 halves, the crow points out. Exactly, which makes it magic. The candle gutters, and silence folds itself around you, like a blanket.
The night has ripened into its quietest hours. Outside, the forest hums with crickets, and the occasional owl hoots as if narrating your every move. Inside your cottage, the air glimmers faintly, because tonight is for dream catching. You pull a row of jars from the shelf, each one stoppered with corks and tied with scraps of ribbon. Some glow faintly, like bottled fireflies. Others shimmer with colors you can't quite name, shades that exist only between sleep and waking. The crow watches with one suspicious eye. "Just don't mix them up with your jam jars again," he warns. "Dreams on toast taste worse than you'd think." You chuckle, because yes, you once accidentally spread someone's nightmare of endless taxes onto a slice of bread. Not your finest breakfast. With careful fingers, you light a cone of incense, the smoke curling upward like a soft staircase. You whisper a spell under your breath, and soon fragments of dreams begin to drift in through the cracks of the window, like moths, but stranger. One shimmers with the giggle of a child learning to ride a bike. Another hums with the panic of a man who forgot his pants before a royal banquet. You guide each one gently into a jar, corking them tight. Folklore is full of dream magic. Ancient Greeks believed dreams could be messages from gods delivered by spirits called oniroi. In contrast, some native traditions saw dreams as journeys of the soul, wandering into other realms. Scholars still debate whether dreams were thought of as prophecies, random brain static, or nightly soap operas sponsored by the subconscious. The quirky tidbit: in 16th century Italy, people actually published dream dictionaries, complete with instructions like, if you dream of fish, expect visitors. If you dream of teeth falling out, check your purse. You suspect those publishers laughed all the way to the bank. Back at your table, you label each jar carefully. Laughter. Soft. Use sparingly. Embarrassment. Mild. Probably safe. Flying with extra geese. The crow leans in. What about that sparkly one? You grin. That's someone's dream of finally remembering all their old passwords. Truly a rare treasure. You arrange the jars neatly, the shelves now glowing with the faint light of bottled wonder. The room feels alive with possibilities, like a library of stories waiting to be uncorked. When you step back, you realize how odd it is. While most people toss their dreams aside come morning, you hoard them like jewels. Maybe that's the witch's job, not to conjure new worlds, but to remind people that their own minds already carry magic. The crow yawns dramatically. "All right, Sandman Jr., let's call it a night." But you're not quite done. You hold one jar close, its glow soft on your skin. It contains a dream of walking barefoot through starlight. Without hesitation, you crack it open just enough to let the shimmer spill into the air. It wraps around you, a hush of light and calm, until your eyelids feel pleasantly heavy. You cork it again, setting it back with the others. The shelves hum faintly, like a lullaby made of glass. And in that glow, you sense that tonight's dreams, yours or someone else's, will be gentler than most.
The night is no longer still, it's alive with possibility.
The crow ruffles his feathers, glances at the moon hanging fat and bright above the treetops, and smirks. Well, you gonna sit here labeling jars all night, or are we taking the broom out for a spin? You glance at the broom leaning against the door. Its handle is worn smooth, bristles sticking out in wild angles. It looks less like a magical vehicle and more like something you'd find abandoned in a janitor's closet. Still, you can't resist. Fine, you sigh, though a grin tugs at your lips. But if we crash into a chimney again, you're the one apologizing. The broom creaks like an old man with bad knees as you straddle it. With a whispered word, it shudders, lifts, and suddenly you're sailing into the night air. Wind rushes past your cheeks, cool and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. The crow cackles gleefully from your shoulder. Beneath you, rooftops stretch in rows, chimneys puffing smoke like sleepy dragons. A dog barks, chasing your shadow down the street. Somewhere, a baker rolls dough for the morning's bread, oblivious to the witch swooping overhead. You tilt the broom and dive low, just enough to make the crow squawk in protest. Folklore is filled with witches in flight. Some say it was ointments, strange brews smeared on skin that gave the sensation of flying. Others believe brooms became symbols of household women's hidden power, transforming the ordinary into the extraordinary. Scholars still argue whether witch flight was meant literally or as a metaphor for freedom from daily drudgery. The quirky tidbit? In 15th century France, records describe villagers swearing they saw witches flying backward on brooms, because apparently style points mattered even in sorcery. You bank sharply, skimming over the forest where owls blink up at you with judgmental eyes. Relax, you mutter. It's not like I'm competing in the Witch Olympics. The crow clings tighter. If you get me splattered on someone's laundry line, I'm haunting you forever. The broom rattles as though laughing, but it carries you faithfully higher until the rooftops look like tiny toy houses. For a moment, you forget the jars, the villagers, even the cauldron humming softly back home. Up here, it's just you, the night, and the endless sweep of stars. You spread your arms wide, letting the broom glide on its own. The wind threads through your hair, the moon keeps pace beside you, and the crow, despite his complaints, leans into the ride with a gleam in his eye. Perhaps this is why witches were said to fly, not for escape, not for power, but for that fleeting, breath-catching freedom of floating above it all. Finally, when your arms grow tired and the broom starts to creak louder than usual, you guide it back toward the crooked roof of your cottage. You land with a thud, stumble off, and pat the broom's handle. Not that, old friend. Maybe next time we'll even stick the landing. The crow hops down, shaking himself. Next time, bring a seat belt.
Back inside the cottage, the air greets you like a warm sigh. The broom rests in the corner, still twitching as if proud of its acrobatics, while the crow collapses onto his perch, muttering something about needing hazard pay. You chuckle softly and move toward the hearth. The cauldron waits, bubbling faintly. Its rhythm is slower now, like the heartbeat of a tired creature drifting into slumber. You stir it lazily with your wooden spoon, the broth swirling in lazy spirals that catch the flicker of the firelight. It smells of herbs and something sweet, though it might just be your imagination. The room is quiet except for the gentle bubbling. You pour yourself a small cup, lift it to your lips, and taste a blend that feels older than memory. Not delicious, not terrible, just grounding. Comfort in liquid form. Witches in stories are often remembered for their cauldrons, great iron pots of endless mystery. Some folklorists claim they symbolized abundance and creation,
the womb of the earth itself. Others insist they were tools of destruction, brewing poisons and curses. Historians still debate whether the cauldron's image comes from Celtic myth, where magical pots could restore life, or whether it was simply the biggest, sturdiest cooking pot in the medieval kitchen, unfairly rebranded as sinister. The quirky tidbit? One Welsh tale insists a giant's cauldron could revive warriors, but they returned mute, unable to speak. Useful for armies, perhaps, less so for family reunions. You smile at the thought, cradling your cup. The crow has already dozed off, head tucked under his wing. The fire crackles softly, shrinking with every snap, like it too is ready for rest. You lean back in your chair, listening to the bubbling slow, the air thicken with warmth, the night folding in on itself. The jars of dreams glow faintly from their shelves, a quiet chorus of possibility. Outside, the moon keeps watch, steady and calm. Your eyelids grow heavier, the spoon slips from your hand, and just as your head tips against the back of the chair, the cauldron hums one last gentle lullaby.
And now the night itself softens. The forest, the cottage, the bubbling cauldron, all of it begins to fade, as if drawn into the hush of a dream. Your breaths slow, deeper, steadier, sinking with the quiet rhythm of the fire's last embers. The shelves glow faintly, but even the dream jars seem drowsy, their light dimming like lanterns being gently covered. The crow shifts once in his sleep, feathers rustling softly, then falls completely still. The broom leans silent in the corner, no longer eager for adventure, only content to rest. Everything in the room eases into stillness, the air, the walls, the floor beneath you. It's as if the entire cottage sighs, finally releasing the weight of the day. And you too can let go. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts grow lighter, like scraps of parchment drifting on a breeze. Nothing presses on you now. The villagers are quiet in their beds, the forest hums in peace, and the spirits you called at dusk have returned to their own hidden places. You are safe here, wrapped in the cocoon of night. Each breath deepens the calm, carrying you further away from the day's chatter, closer to the gentle rhythm of sleep. Allow the last images to settle, a cauldron dimming, a crow dreaming, a shelf of jars glowing softly in the dark. Picture them fading, not gone, but resting like you. And as you drift, imagine the moon leaning closer, whispering a good night only you can hear. So close your eyes, breathe in the quiet, let the story dissolve into stillness. Sweet dreams, 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 dreams.